Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, the time it is where you are. I'm Gregor Marецki. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Continuum Industries, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the first webinar of the international forum where we're trying to, well, get a bit smarter on how we're doing permitting. I'm one of the founders of Continuum Industries. Sharon, if we have the slides, if we can pop them up. I'm one of the founders of Continuum. We are a software company. It's not about us today, but the introduction is that while we started in the UK, I'm today based in New York. We found across the board, across Europe, across North America and many other regions, that people try different things when they try to do permitting because they struggle. It's a common struggle across the board, across all of the regions, across all the countries. And we're trying to figure it out. So why would we try to reinvent the wheel every single time? We thought it might be good to start sharing some of those learnings that we are seeing in different locations. Continuum Industries, very briefly, we're a software company. We developed a piece of software to help transmission developers take their projects from start to a permit being granted as fast as possible at the lowest possible risk. And our software has been used to identify the initial routes, corridors much faster, and then help to work through the permitting and iteration process for over, right now, this has been used for over 80,000 kilometers. And well, we've thought it would be good to share our learnings with others. And we're thrilled to be joined today as co-hosts for this webinar by the Renewables Grid Initiative. If we can flip to the next one, Sharon, who bring together the transmission companies, the TSOs in Europe, with NGOs to really spread the word, right? Spread the word, what works, what doesn't work, promote good practices across the board. I've got one of my favorite papers from them. One of my favorite publications will be as a civil engineer on undergrounding of transmission lines. There's always pros and cons. That's a really nice one from a few years ago, but still very much topical. And well, our host for today, Sharon Darcy, who will be chairing the session. Sharon has been promoting policies working across the board of energy, water, infrastructure in general, and promoting good practices on how to engage with stakeholders, how to get things done, not just quickly, but also well, while bringing all of the stakeholders on board. Over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Greg. So today we're here to talk about permitting. In some countries, we use different terminology. So in your country, you might not call it permitting. I know in the UK, where I'm from, we call it consenting. And we've got a fantastic case study today, which is about permitting in renewables. But a lot of the learning, I think, is relevant if it's suitably adapted to other sectors. So to water, to transport projects, etc. So our theme today is how do we streamline and accelerate permitting processes? We're going to start off with a fantastic case study from EasyPermits. Then I'm going to ask the presenters a few questions. And then in the last 10 minutes, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask additional questions. But until then, if you could keep your cameras off and keep on mute, that would be great. And when we get to questions, we're going to be old-fashioned, and we use the old-fashioned electronic raise your hands button, which is under the React button, I think, at the bottom of the screen. So please do think of some questions for our fantastic panel. So I'm delighted to be joined by Shweta Jadhav, who's the Renewables and Utilities Advisor for Accenture. And Shweta is not only that, but she's also I think, a fellow for the World Economic Forum in this area. And Shweta is joined by Carol Yen, and Carol is the EMEA Energy Transition and Renewables Lead for Amazon Web Services, and she's a real expert in digital and cloud transformation. And they're joined by Guy Willems, who's the Environment and Community Engagement Advisor for WindEurope. So I'm delighted to be joined by the panel. So I hand over, I think, to Guy, to you in the first instance. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Sharon. Shweta, if you could get the slides on screen. There they are. So we wanted to start off with explaining to you why we started developing EasyPermit, what was the need for it, and then move on to what the tool can do and the challenges that we faced while developing the tool and rolling it out. Next slide, please, Shweta. So to decarbonize Europe, we need massive amounts of renewables to power our homes, our factories, shops, cars, data centers, anything related to electricity you can think of. This has to be done fast, sustainably, in happy coexistence with society, respecting biodiversity, and balancing many other interests. We have this technology as the wind industry. It can be delivered, and the industry is ready. Um, but all the requirements that I mentioned before make spatial planning and permitting also a very complicated task. And before we get to the delivery stage, we have to get through what is in a lot of countries a very painful process of permitting or consenting, like you indeed call it in the UK. Next slide, please, Shweta. So at WindEurope, we've seen for years that the expansion of wind energy is not going fast enough. And there are many reasons for this, but the main one is slow and cumbersome permitting procedures all across Europe. And as it stands right now, we will fall short of the 2030 targets that the European Union has put up for us. I don't know if you can still see the slides. For me, the screen has gone black. There it is. Next slide, please, Shweta. So permitting delays have created all sorts of problems, both on the supply and demand side. We want to go fast, we want to be ambitious, we want to pave the way for others. But the truth is we are lagging behind, like I showed you in this other slide. Slow bureaucracy is something that is very hard to picture visually for many of us. We often maybe think of that person in the local municipality or the regional council who is overloaded with paperwork. Next slide, please. For us and for many other industries, it looks like this. This is what bureaucracy looks like for the wind industry, the reality of permitting in Europe. On the left, you can see a permit application for an offshore wind farm in Ireland. For one application, a single application, this developer had to print 13,000 pages. And these 13,000 pages had to go to 13 different institutions. So in total, they had to print 170,000 pages for one project. On the right-hand side, you can see the permit application for an onshore project in Germany, a repowering project. That means that you're replacing old turbines with new ones, 10 turbines, and you see that there's 75 folders standing there for one single project. You can only imagine the scale for that goes on for all permitting procedures in Europe. And the thousands of euros that we have to pay, our industry has to pay, just to print all of this. It's really out of control, I would almost say, and definitely not the most sustainable way of dealing with things and the sustainable way forward. Next slide, please. So at European level, we've actually had some good legislation put in place. After a lot of legislation, negotiation, the so-called Renewable Energy Directive was reformed, revised at European level. And all member states of the EU now have to introduce this legislation. Now, there's two important things for permitting when it comes to creating this tool called EasyPermits that we made. First of all, applicants currently have to approach many different institutions. Here in the first point on the slide, you see that in the law it now says that applicants shall only be required to contract one contact point during the entire procedure. Secondly, by the end of this year, by November, all member states have to digitalize their permit granting procedures so that they're carried out in a fully electronic form, and we're moving away from these pictures that I showed you before. Next slide, please. On top of that, we've also had clear dedication from every single European government that they want to speed up permitting. This also included the ambition to digitalize things, and the European Commission wants to help with that as well. So the governments clearly get it. They've signed their commitment at the highest level to improve the situation, and yet we are still stuck with the right-hand situation over here. So this is where EasyPermits was born. We needed concrete tools to solve this problem. And this is where WindEurope, AWS, and Accenture came together to develop EasyPermits, a tool that creates both a one-stop shop, like I mentioned before, and a fully digitalized system that will make the pictures that I showed you earlier, hopefully soon, a thing of the past. But of course, this tool can also be used for other technologies wider than wind energy, which is also why we're presenting it here today. Shweta will now show you how we developed EasyPermits, how it functions, and also potentially how it can be used for other technologies.
Thanks, Guy. Jump over to the next slide. Yes. As Guy mentioned, this has truly been a collaborative project. Our three organizations, we've been working on this since early 2023, which is when we really developed a prototype within 12 weeks using Amazon's working backwards methodology, where we place customers at the heart. In our case, this was the permitting agent. We launched this prototype at the WindEurope annual conference in April to an overwhelming response from the industry, where we also started then collecting the main challenges from the perspective of the project developers as well as the community members. Collectively, we've conducted over 200 hours of workshops and interviews to truly understand the main challenges and the main user groups. And this is what we came up with. It was very clear to us that the main bottlenecks in permitting lies at the municipalities, at the permitting agent side, that affects the project developers. But it also became apparent that making this transparency in the planning and permitting and the consenting process towards the community members is also essential. Hence, these form our main user groups. The first one, the permitting agents, the officials in the public authorities at the municipal, regional, or national level that process the permit application. Second is the project developers, the companies developing the renewable projects and submitting the permit application. And thirdly, the community members that are affected by the projects being planned and developed in their surrounding areas. Through all the workshops, the challenges that contribute towards significant delays kept resonating across the board, and they were threefold. The first one, information management. We've all seen those massive piles of paper before. So that's just like one permit application. And in today's world, edits and updates are done usually via phone, over email, and then transferred over to the desktop. A lot of time is wasted or in just keeping everything organized. Permitting agents are also faced with the challenge of files coming in different formats via different channels, often with missing information. And it's really hard to know exactly what type of information is needed for everyone collaborating. The second one is collaboration. We know that permitting agents have multiple permit applications to process on top of their day job at the municipalities. In the EU, in some member states, there are more than 80 different public bodies that are involved in weighing in on a single permit application. Information about these requirements are often not easy to locate. It could be incomplete, causing significant delays further in the process. In some cases, it's also the project developer's responsibility to coordinate this effort across the multiple public agencies for gathering all the necessary permits for a single project. The third one is process transparency. Transparency for the permitting agents and the project developer means having a single overview of the most urgent and important tasks so that they can action and move things along. But it's also towards the external stakeholders. Currently, what we found, it's very difficult for the permitting agent to be able to provide a status update for all the projects in the pipeline, both towards the project developers as well as to the general community members. Sharing information of the planned projects and the impact that they might have on the local community is an important role of the permitting agent. And these are the three types of challenges that we are trying to address. I will now present a short demo of the solution to demonstrate some of the features. We are using an internal environment and dummy data in this particular demo. And for technical reasons, we've pre-recorded some of it so that we can show you everything. So here we go. EasyPermits, we've built this as a serverless and cloud-based solution using AWS services. Being web-based, it means that a user only needs an internet connection and a web browser to access it and does not need to worry about downloading and installing it. As you can see, it is currently available in English, Danish, and Polish. One of our design principles for making EasyPermits was to make it intuitive and user-friendly, requiring little to no training for the three user groups, which you can clearly see in this slide. It's community members, permitting agents, and the project developers. The permitting agents and the project developers, they need to create an account to sign and then use that to log in to the tool, whereas the community members can access it direct without creating an account. Next, I'd like to present some common scenarios and how we also tackle the challenges that we've seen earlier. The first scenario is, of course, the permit submission process. As Guy mentioned, today the application is likely paper-based, over thousands of pages, enough to fill a small van. With EasyPermits, we are simplifying the information management right from the get-go. The form that you see here is defined by the permit agents for a particular technology in that respective jurisdiction. The ability to define these templates make it easier to configure to those specificities. As you can see, the project developer is providing the information as the first step that will be automatically used in the following steps. By collecting exactly the necessary information from the start, we solve for the problem of too little or too much information. Submitting this initial request will also help the permitting agent to request new documents. I'd like to show you next that how the permitting agent uses a standardized workflow. They start by creating a workflow that is specific to that particular jurisdiction. Then the tool then recommends a number of mandatory documents for that particular application. We've set this in conjunction with the permitting agent. So they define the documents that are required across the permitting process for each stage of the process. The permitting agent then also, after defining those, they set the timelines and the milestones for each of the steps of the permitting process. This is another way where we help. By making the timelines and deadlines visible, we make it easier to hold everyone accountable and true to it. We can also add more collaborators. Here you can see you can add some subject matter experts like a BAT advisor or a roads expert to weigh in on particular things. I'd like to move into the next scenario, which is understanding the status of the permit application. And so this is where we are addressing the challenge of process transparency and collaboration. So as you see here, the project developer has logged in, and the first screen that they see is a dashboard, which gives them an overview of the different projects that they have ongoing, the different stages that the projects are in, as well as how far they have progressed in each of the different stages. There's a bell that also notifies if there have been new activity on that particular project, so it also makes it easier to track which ones to go. There is a tasks tab, which gives an overview of the task by week, next week, as well as overall. So it also makes it easier to hold yourself accountable on what's the most critical actions to do, by when are they due, and what processes are they linked to. This helps keep everyone accountable. This type of a dashboard view is visible for the permitting agent as well as the project developer. Of course, they each see their own tasks, but the view is the same. So it also helps with giving a platform, a single source of truth while collaborating. The next scenario I'd like to share is that for preparing for public consultation meetings. So this is an important step, at least in Europe, where a community engagement and stakeholder engagement is necessary. The first thing that we see, now this is a zoomed in view for one particular project application. So what we see here is that the solution organizes the respective documents per stage. So as you can see, it's in the initial public consultation stage. There's a single repository. And once you go inside that, you are able to see the different documents and the revision history, the comment history. This allows for effective collaboration between the permitting agent and the project developers who are working on that particular document. So you're not going through your emails, you are not trying to remember the phone call or that meeting and really trying to address what updates are needed. If there are any updates or revisions that are required, you can do that specifically for that particular document. Additionally, if you go back on the solution, you also get a history of the respective tasks. This also relates to keeping the documents, holding everyone accountable for doing the actions in time, and hopefully then everything shortens in the timeline. Further down on the particular project overview, there is also a log. So it maintains a history of the project, when it was started, when it initiated, but also a history of comments, both on a document level as well as on the project level. So this also helps improve the collaboration and the transparency in how permitting authorities and project developers collaborate towards a particular permit application. And this all helps then in preparing for the public consultations or other milestones that are necessary. The last feature that I'd like to share about EasyPermits is how do we make it transparent to the communities. Our focus when developing this tool was more on improving the collaboration between the permitting agents and project developers. So this is where this feature is more basic on community engagement, but it nevertheless gives an opportunity to make it transparent. So for instance, when you go into this particular tool as a community member, when they click on what are the new projects, they get into this map view where you could filter by the different stages a particular project is in, and then also navigate through on how it's simplified on how to use the page. You could add your local location in the search bar or zoom in on the map to look at particular projects. Once you click on a particular project, it gives you an overview of where it is in the permitting life cycle, what are the different stages that are still upcoming, as well as some high-level information on how big is the project, how many turbines, and in some cases, if there is an external website for the project that can be gone to for more information, or some links to the documentation that require you to comment as a community. There's also an FAQ section, because we also learned from permitting agents that a lot of times people come up with the same questions and they lose a lot of time answering the same question. So instead, they could point them to the FAQs. That relieves their time to focus on the more important tasks for permitting. So those were the features. Very quickly, some of the features of EasyPermits and the most common scenarios. As you probably got a sense, we did this for onshore wind in a particular municipality in Denmark, but it can be configured towards other technologies that have different requirements as well in their specific jurisdictions as well. With this, I'll conclude the demo, and I'd like to pass it on to Carol, who can share more on the experience of the end users while they were testing the tool, as well as other voices of support. So Carol, over to you.
So for everyone who's joined, I don't know if you expected to see a detailed demo of the tool, but we wanted to take you kind of right into the heart of the work that we've been doing, and to show you that this is beyond theory, and we've actually put in practice a lot of the best practices around understanding, the key pain points of the particular. Oh, Shweta, I just lost your slides. I don't know if you've. Where the key pain points of the end user, and really understanding what are the blockers. And as Shweta mentioned, from transparency, collaboration, and visibility, these are the feedback that we heard back. So some of the stats I'll leave you with when we implemented this and brought this to production in Denmark. Some of the statistics we heard specifically were that the permitting agent said that they have a 50% reduction in administrative tasks. And how that 50% is achieved is through a lot of the automation and submission templates that Shweta walked you through, right? Things that someone has to currently flip through all of the paper to make sure that everything is there, that's eliminated with making that whole streamlined piece automated. And the other part that was really insightful was around talking about their potential to now process more than 3 times more permit applications. So let me explain to you what that means in practice. So because of the sheer volume of information that they have to process, typically that is one of the major bottlenecks that a lot of these municipal agents currently have, right? So if you're running a tender, or if you're currently working through applications, you have to some degree almost approach them in a waterfall way. You have to get through one application before you move on to the next. Now what this tool allows some of the permitting agents to be able to accomplish is to process things in parallel. And that becomes increasingly important, as Guy had walked us through earlier, the huge surge and the growth that we're expecting to see in Europe, because we certainly are not seeing the investment in more resources. So how do you actually make the resources work smarter, not harder, while you use technology to be able to make it easier? There's an expression that we've kind of internally adopted, where the EU mandate and the Red Directive are great, those are the rules, but now we need tools. We need we don't just need rules, we also need tools. And this really simply is what the tool is meant to accomplish, is to help ease a lot of the manual workload that currently is really hindered the ability to be able to process these projects. In addition to the feedback that we got from the developers as well as the permitting agents, we also have socialized this with other regions. And depending, I know there's many of you that potentially are covering specific regions. Initially, one of the first pieces of feedback we always hear is, "Oh no, but our process is very different than Denmark. Oh no, it's very different than Ireland." And what we learned once we went really deep and understood and compared the permitting or consenting process region to region is, yes, there are certain differences, of course, and there's certain regional aspects and policy aspects, but overall, the pain points sit not in the nuance of the process, but actually getting through the process end to end, and the major blockers are the same. And the major process steps are the same. So the one of the design principles we have in developing developing this technology is making this modular so that we can easily leverage the tool that's built for the overall process, but be able to tweak it and make it specific to each of the regions we're serving. So whether that's language changes, whether that's policy changes, but being able to use the tool and use, you know, the 80% and tweak for the 20% that starts to be different. So you can see all of the different regions we're currently engaged with and in conversations with, and some of the feedback that we've already heard back to say, you know, this is absolutely the standard we need to get to. And one of the other quotes that we've also talked about internally is making sure we're not digitizing the problem. So just because it says we need to put things digitally, let's make sure that the process isn't just 1,300 PDF pages that you've been able to upload to a portal, right? That's not solving anyone's problem. Now you just have a storage problem. So how do we actually create a solution that actually eliminates and, you know, helps you go from 13,000 to just the 5 pages that you need to process and really need to put your input on, and be able to do that as quickly as possible. The last slide, it's a logo wall, but it's really just to show you all some of the, you know, conversations we've had with organizations across the board, both from developers as well as organizations like the World Economic Forum, as well as the International Energy Agency, which is, you know, everyone's oriented around trying to solve this. This is a bottleneck that, you know, has been around for decades, but now is being exacerbated by the growth that we need to see in the European landscape. So how do we all work together and collaborate in a way that brings together expertise from all different parts of the value chain to solve for this problem, right? It might be unique to you to see that we have this kind of 3-pronged, even just collaboration, right? Guy is representing WindEurope, that obviously brings the industry expertise and knowledge and support. From AWS, we hope to bring the technology and all of the innovation around the technology and the processes, ways of working. And then Accenture is the powerhouse that's been able to kind of bring this to life and build the tool. So, and I say that to say, you know, as a best practice to take back to your day-to-day is, how do you start leveraging these partnerships in new ways, in ways that perhaps, you know, you haven't seen before, because the problem is too big for any one of us to solve alone. How do we start to leverage new partnerships to be able to get to the result faster, and not reinvent the wheel constantly, and learn from each other? So that's why we're so pleased to be here, and I wanted to leave. I'll kind of end it with a couple more comments, because we definitely want to leave more for discussion. But in summary, Shweta, if you go to the next slide and to, you know, just pull away from the distraction of all of the different quotes. I would say I would leave you with, you know, why we're here today is very much to raise some recognition and awareness that not just that the tool exists, but the thinking and the process and the way that we've been working exists, and it's worked, and we've used this the different ways of working and the different expertise to be able to solve this big challenge of permitting altogether, and we were able to solve it relatively quickly. Now the challenge, the next I'd say mountain to climb is how do we now scale this solution, and how do we get this in front of, you know, for those of you that are potentially permitting agents, either on the developer side or on the government side, how do we get this in your hands? Part of it is we're asking you to be our ambassador for you to champion this project, and you can certainly reach out to any of us to have a conversation around how this can help you transform your day-to-day. And for some of the, you know, the government authorities that might be on the call of how do we work together so that you're not reinventing the wheel and building this from scratch. So you know, Sharon, I'll pass it over to you for some dialogue. Hopefully that's been, you know, just scratching the surface of what we've done and the use case today. And we're certainly, you know, delighted to take any more questions and have further discussion.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Guy, Shweta, and Carol. Clearly, there's massive potential with these sorts of tools, but we've been talking about the need to streamline and really make processes less bureaucratic for quite a long time. The European Renewables Energy Directive is a sort of lever that you can use, I guess, that will spur people on to action in your area. But, what is it that really provides the pull for these tools? What gets all the different stakeholders on the same page?
Yeah, let me have a go at that one. I think from the, of course, there's many industries who are dealing with this issue, right? I think we were finally the ones to say, okay, we've had enough. There needs to be this digital solution that can be scaled easily, quickly, rolled out quickly, and we just sat together after that. Of course, the legislative side helps a lot here. Now the implementation of those things at national level are not always optimal. I have to be honest about that. And I doubt that every single EU member state will have a digital one-stop shop by that 21st of November deadline that I was showing you earlier. But that is also why we're so happy to participate in forums like this today. We want to get that solution out there. We want to help those member states with this solution, roll it out, speed things up so that we can really get going.
And how do you bring the different stakeholders, the permitting agents, the project developers, and the community groups? How do you bring them all together to create that momentum?
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. Of course, we as WindEurope, we represent all of these developers at European level. We have over 600 members, so let's say the whole wind energy industry at least is represented by us. And it is indeed a challenge to get to those national authorities, to speak to them, to make sure that they're convinced. We already do this at our own events, for example. As I explained to you before, Sharon, we host quite some big events throughout the years, where we national and local policymakers present, and we really try to promote a tool like EasyPermits to them as well through those forums. And at European level, we work together a lot with the European Commission, who themselves have many working groups that work together with national authorities, national ministries, agencies. So there's a couple of channels that we use to also get to those national national actors, let's say.
Thank you, Guy. I'm thinking about how this works in practice and the implementation challenges. In Denmark, you've clearly got a good case study there. Could you perhaps give us a bit of a flavour of any of the practical implementation challenges that the Danish team using this have faced?
Shweta, are you taking this one?
Yeah, I can start on this one. Well, as Carol mentioned earlier, the first challenge, the first hurdle to overcome is really just getting over this inertia of, oh no, but this is not what we need. Oh no, our process is too complex. This is not what can solve our problem. So really having those conversations and inviting them to the workshops and really trying to understand their pain points is the first hurdle to overcome. The next one is to, we were surprised at how little the understanding of what permitting process looks like varies from individual to individual, because I think everyone interprets the law differently. So it's also, the challenge was also to really map out the permitting process. How many stages does it have? And then so we really did these design thinking workshops with the end users, where we sat down with them, went deep into understanding and asking the right questions to map the process. And then then people start understanding the value of building a tool, because then it allows for a single version of truth, a common understanding, even for a simple interpretation of a law, whether it has 5 stages or 6 stages, and whether one document is required in multiple stages or no, it's only required in stage 1, not in stage 5. I think it also became easier along the way, but those are definitely the hurdles that we need to go through. And we've noticed that with Denmark, we had the same experience with Poland as well as Ireland. So it's similar across the board.
Yeah, and if I may add to this, a big issue that we're having in really rolling out the tool are public procurement rules. So every country that we go to has to follow, of course, EU legislation when it comes to buying external services or products. So every country we go to and every public institution we talk to has to launch this public procurement process even to start working with us, which obviously is taking a lot of time, and it can be very complicated. Another challenge to highlight is that each entity describes in their procurement process what they think they need, and we will bid then with our EasyPermits offer. But we also want to streamline the permitting procedure there and see which documents are really needed. How can our software help you to speed up this whole procedure as much as we can? So that we don't, as Carol mentioned earlier, digitalize the problem and continue printing after the platform is actually in place.
I thought that was a really good way of explaining it. And I also like what you said, Carol, about focusing on the 80% of what you can do that's common. I wondered, are there things in the 20% that you could point to now that you could say, well, these need to be dealt with by other mechanisms?
So specifically, we can jump into the other examples, but maybe let me describe what typically is in the 20%. One of the biggest things that we found is language. So having local, being in a local language is I would say probably 80% of the 20%. Not to be now too facetious about this, but it's around and what we've been able to do is because of the how many different municipalities we've gone through this process already, is we go in with now a short multi-day workshop, 1 or 2 days, and we can very quickly map and find what those 20%, the 20% differences are compared to the global, best practice process that we have. I'd say our global standard, our European, standard of what a permitting process looks like. So a lot of it is language. The other part that gets into some of the specifics is typically the specific other governmental authorities that each of the and sometimes they're called different things, and sometimes they might be in different sequences. But typically what we found is that that 20% is all of the, everyone's 100% process looks more or less the same. But so how do we actually, the sequence might be out of order, and like I said, the language is going to be different, but then how do we build a tool with almost the Lego blocks that you can pick up and move around and be able to map it to the process flow that we need?
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm thinking it would be good to bring some members of the audience in now. So at the bottom of your screens, there is a react button which should have a raise hand. So have we got any questions? I've got lots more. So if nobody does, I can keep going. But does anybody want to come in with a question? Jan Bessel. Jan, would you like to say, Jan, who you are and where you're from?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jan Bessel. I'm a strategic planning advisor at Pinsent Mason's law firm, and I'm also involved in the National Infrastructure Planning Association and the Royal Town Planning Institute in the UK, and Building with Nature. So I'm going to jump to the community bit, the community engagement, which is probably the least developed element. And how do you ensure that's accessible for everyone, so that the community can genuinely engage and participate, particularly anyone where digital is a barrier?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Jan. I think, I mean, in the general project development of any, for us, wind farm, there is developers have to take care of those things on an individual project level, and our tool is just an addition to what those developers are already doing. Shweta showed a bit that many developers already make their own websites, and on there well, we already have the link on there, but of course this is a digital platform. It is there to give extra information to local communities about what's going on around where they live. And developers, of course, have to take make extra efforts to make sure that those people who may be not so familiar with digital technologies also get the right information. And I would say that's a bit outside of the scope of our tool, maybe. I don't know if Carol or Shweta, you have to add anything?
No, I think you covered it. And to your point, it is a tool. It can solve part of the problem, but then there are interventions that does need human contact, and that needs to happen on the ground by the project developers. But then if there are specific use cases that can be solved digitally, we can definitely explore on how to do that together.
Thank you very much for that one. And just for everyone to know, our next session is specifically going to be on tools that can help with engagement. So we'll be coming back to this in due course. We've got a question now from Mona. Mona, would you like to see who you are and where you're from, please?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my name is Mona Date. I work at Skyborn Renewables in Sweden. So I'm working with offshore wind. So that's my question about, have you thought about implementing this for offshore wind as well, or is it just for onshore for now and for a while? Thank you.
Yeah, I can also take it. We started developing the tool with onshore wind because that's just where we started. That was the easiest process to map out, and we managed to work together with the Danish municipality to develop EasyPermits at that point. In the long run, EasyPermits can be used for different technologies, also for solar, for offshore wind, for other permitting applications that there are. In the end, to really simplify it, is all it does, it's streamlining and collecting the information in one place and making sure that those who are responsible for certain steps know they are and know that they have to take action. So yes, offshore wind should also be part of EasyPermits when we roll it out. Yes, definitely.
Thank you for that. We've had a question from someone from Equinor who's had to go and pick up her kids, but her question was, how might this apply in the UK? Now we're no longer subject to the Renewables Energy Directive. And while you're thinking about that, we've also got Sally coming in. Sally, would you like to ask your question and say where you're from?
Hi, yeah, Sally Horwood. I work in strategic permitting in Ørsted, and actually I saw the question from Rainier at Equinor, and I have the same question actually, but also expanding out to, you know, we have projects in the States, in Asia, and how would you see this working outside of Europe, if at all it can be applied outside of Europe?
Yeah, I can take this one as well. Of course, in the EU, there's now the legal obligation for member states to digitalize their permitting procedure. But these issues, of course, as many people on this on this webinar know very well, are not just issues that play in Europe. Of course, the UK has very similar issues to the ones that we were showing before, and the EasyPermits can really be adapted to any national framework because of this Lego block approach that Shweta and Carol were speaking about before. It can be translated, other legal procedures or requirements can be included within the tool. So there is definitely space for it to not just be an EU tool, but for it to also be used outside and speed up things in other countries too.
Thank you.
While we're waiting for another question, I had a question about data. These models and tools are only as good often as the data that you get in. Have you had any particular data issues in developing the tool and in the case studies where you've used the tool, and particularly around cyber? This is critical infrastructure. You know, how are you dealing with the cyber challenges that come from these types of tools?
As a technologist, I love that question. It's so let me maybe take both one at a time, Sharon. So first on data. So on data, I think the peculiar learning that we had was it's not that the data in the current process doesn't exist, but a lot of it, as we said, is all manual. So shifting towards a digital process will actually enable us to make better use of the data available. We had a conversation around how once you actually have over time more applications come in, you can now use reports. You can see where the requests are being had of different types of visibility across whether it's application sites or you can now kind of imagine all of the different applications of how you might use that data to better inform future planning, future consenting, et cetera. So that's certainly one that we learned that a lot of current municipalities aren't really using the data of their past applications purely because they currently live in stacks of paper, right? And no one's going to want to do the manual data entry to put that somewhere. So, kind of step one is going through this process will enable them to now actually use the data in a much more intelligent and insightful way than they've been previously asked. The second question around security, I think was maybe where you were going to is, certainly it's an easy statement for me to make, but I mean, I think the team here have been seeing it in practice. Security, obviously it's top of mind in utilities. My day job expands working for customers that are all across the energy value chain. AWS is the most secure cloud computing platform today. Now, we're talking about the same security infrastructure that's trusted by global banks, military organizations around the world. And so it's a really easy statement for me to make, but let me just explain what that means. So our infrastructure has 24/7 monitoring. It has encryption of all of the data that's in transit and at rest. And the security infrastructure itself is independently certified for standards that matter most to utilities, right? So we're certified for NERC-CIP in the US, and NIS2 directive here in Europe to PCSI, DSS. The list goes on and on in terms of the certifications. But the reason I share this is because we know that, I mean, at Amazon, we say security is job zero. So nothing works without security and data protection. And it's certainly one of the reasons that WindEurope contacted us of let's build a platform, but we need to build it in somewhere that is secure and puts that as priority.
And I can compliment to Carol on Accenture side as a technology vendor. We are also security and data privacy, data protection is also #1 priority for us when we deliver to all our clients. And it becomes especially relevant and stricter when we are dealing with public sector clients because those measures become much higher, much more stringent. So Carol and Guy, they're aware of how many loops we need to hoop through on the Accenture side, but that's also because we embed these practices right from the get-go. We have trainings. When we make certain design decisions about the type of infrastructure that we use, the way we design code, the way we abstract it, those all come into play. And then from a tool perspective on the EasyPermits, as I mentioned, way to implement that on the user side is, of course, to have those login profiles, those multi-factor authentications that we currently have in place that do form the first barrier towards protection. But then it also ultimately is also a very human problem, and the weakest link always is the human weakness. But those we also try to complement by providing the right change management training while adopting the tool.
Oh, Sharon, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that's really comprehensive. Thank you. Right, one very last quick question from Francisco. Francisco, would you like to say where you're from? And if you could be quick, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Francisco. I'm coming from Portugal, and I work in a research center on biodiversity, including the links between energy infrastructure and biodiversity. And the two short comments. First one is that, at least in my country, the permitting agent is really the key to eventually take the decision on the use of this tool or not. It's absolutely the key issue in my country. And of course, it could make sense to use such a tool, particularly given the requirement from EU countries of designating the renewables acceleration areas where supposedly the permitting procedures should be much easier. So would this be a way of trying to convince this that the tool that you are developing could be on a first stage used in the permitting process within the so-called renewable acceleration areas? Thanks for the time.
Thank you. A very quick response. Who's going to go?
I'm gonna go for it, Sharon. Thank you for the question, Francisco. I think it's not a tool that we can really use for the mapping of acceleration areas, but of course, once they have been established, it's something that can be catered for within the tool, right? Because there's different requirements for permits within renewables acceleration areas versus those outside of it, and those things could easily be catered for within the system with the different requirements that are set. I think that answers your question, but I'm going to keep it at that.
I was
keep it
talking not
shortly.
about mapping, but about the procedures for the permitting within those areas that will be defined soon.
Yeah, so that's definitely something the tool can take care of, and let's say will take care of once those things have been established and we roll it out in multiple member states. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Right. I think we need to draw this discussion to a halt because we're running out of time. But I'd really like to take this opportunity to say a really big thank you to Guy and Shweta and Carol and to their organisations. I think you've given us some really good food for thought about what you can do in this area if you have a will to try and do things. And I would hope that through the life of the Smart Permitting International Forum, we're able to track some of your progress and see how much uptake you get. Guy and Shweta and Carol have all said that they'd be willing to sort of take questions afterwards, so please do get in touch with them later if you have further questions. So I'd also like to thank our hosts today, Continuum Industries, and also Renewables Grid Initiative, who have been fantastic in helping us get this event off the ground. As I mentioned earlier on in response to a question, we do now have a date for our next meeting, our next webinar, which is going to be on the 15th of April. And this is going to be on the subject of community and stakeholder engagement, which is absolutely critical. And we know that there are some specific tools and indeed just new face-to-face approaches that are being developed in this area. So please do put that date in your diaries. And if you look in the chat, this is the first meeting of our Smart Permitting International Forum. We would really welcome your feedback. And Greg is going to put a link to a little survey in the chat. Please do fill it in. It'll help us ensure that our next session really is tailored to your needs. So thank you very much to the panel and to our hosts. And I look forward to seeing you at our next occasion. Thank you.